Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. This week we are talking about Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which had a debut that went far beyond anyone's expectations. I'm actually glad I waited to do the show until today because it was one of those cases that we've seen a few times, especially with a movie that's a big hit with audiences, where the estimates come in over the weekend, and every time the estimates are revised, the total goes up. We're going to break all of that down, a historic weekend at the box office. A lot to get into, but before we do that, I wanted to take a moment here at the top of the show to acknowledge a couple of people who passed away in the last couple of days. One of them is a name that you may not be familiar with, but is a huge figure in the formation of the modern film industry, and that is Jean-Paul Belmondo, who was the co-star of Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless, one of the most influential movies in the history of cinema. This is one that I didn't see until 2 or 3 years ago for the first time because, quite frankly, a lot of times French New Wave movies, I'm sort of take it or leave it on it. And I think that this is a must-see if you are a fan of movies. You can draw a direct line between this film and the work of filmmakers like Quentin Tarantino and others who have made movies in the decades since this film was made. Jean-Paul Belmondo went on to be a very popular movie star in France for several decades after Breathless, but it is his performance in this film which left its mark on the movies forever. And then a real kind of a shocker that came across just yesterday, Michael K. Williams has passed away. He grew to fame or prominence primarily for most people on the HBO show The Wire as Omar. If you've seen The Wire, Omar is an unforgettable performance. He is one of those characters that passed into pop culture. And, you know, if that had been Michael K. Williams' only work in his career, then he would be remembered just for that. However, he has worked in dozens of TV shows and movies before and since The Wire. He recently appeared in Lovecraft Country. He was a recurring regular on Boardwalk Empire. He currently is a voice on the Netflix show F for Family. There are some upcoming episodes apparently that he completed work on, so we have not seen the last of Michael K. Williams. There are a couple of other projects that have been completed before his passing. This is tragically an early passing for Michael K. Williams, who continued to operate and do work across a variety of different genres, different kinds of films. He was a 5-time Primetime Emmy nominee for work including Lovecraft Country, When They See Us, Vice, The Night Of, and Bessie. Truly one of those performers that is memorable in whatever role you see him. I remember he was in like 2 seconds of The Incredible Hulk, and still I remember him almost instantly when I think about that movie, early MCU movie. Always sad to see an icon pass away, but particularly sad when someone passes away as prematurely as Michael K. Williams. So a quick remembrance of both of those gentlemen, Jean-Paul Belmondo and Michael K. Williams, and the work that they leave behind. Let us turn now to the box office, which is the official last weekend of the summer box office, Labor Day weekend here in the United States. And it went out with a bang because we knew that Shang-Chi was probably going to break the box office records. Labor Day traditionally has not been a huge movie-going weekend. The big blockbusters are usually out by then. You may get a new movie that's opening, but nothing on the level of Shang-Chi. So the fact that it did break the record is not a surprise, but the degree to which Shang-Chi broke the record was a huge surprise because it outperformed all predictions and expectations. Let's look first at the 3-day box office weekend. So this is Friday through Sunday, and even if this had been the 4-day total, I think it would have been really impressive. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, $75.3 million. A lot of people were estimating $50 million, maybe 60, so a huge overperformance there from what many of the expectations were. Candyman in its second week dropped about 53%, which for a horror film isn't terrible. That's about standard for a movie that was a #1 opening the week before. So we did not see the bottom drop out of Candyman, as we often do with horror movies in the second weekend. Free Guy's still hanging around in its 4th week in 3rd place with $8.8 million. Jungle Cruise in its 6th week hanging around. And look how close it was between number 4 and number 5 on the 3-day weekend. Jungle Cruise outperforming Paw Patrol the movie, but only by about $2,000 out of $4 million. It's not often that you see a box office picture look that close. But then the numbers, when you look at the 4-day Labor Day weekend, get even better for Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. $94.6 million. That is a number that nobody would have predicted. So a big weekend. It held all weekend. It had a great holiday Monday yesterday, and it's now almost at $100 million after only 4 days of release. Candyman still number 2 with $12.5 million. Free Guy adds $11.2 million at number 3. And then over the long weekend, because families generally do tend to go to the movies on holiday Mondays, Paw Patrol the movie jumps over to number 4 over Jungle Cruise at $5.3 million. Jungle Cruise drops to number 5 over the 4-day weekend, but still very close to Paw Patrol the movie at just under $5.1 million. But Shang-Chi, of course, is the story that is the banner headline of the box office weekend. And not just because it opened high, but because we have these benchmarks with holiday weekends to see what the movie-going behavior usually looks like. Shang-Chi decimated every box office record for Labor Day weekend. These are the top 5 4-day grosses over the Labor Day weekend. Now, this is not openings. This is all movies that played in previous Labor Day weekends. And you can see Shang-Chi with nearly $95 million. It tops the previous weekend record held by The Sixth Sense in its 5th week back in 1999 by almost $60 million. Even if you adjust for inflation, it still tops that record by about $30 million. Halloween 2007, directed by Rob Zombie, was the previous high opener for Labor Day weekend at $30.5 million. Guardians of the Galaxy in its 5th week made $22.9 million, and then The Possession at $21 million. So again, we expected that Shang-Chi was going to break this record, but I was honestly surprised. I thought that it would do well, but I did not think that we would see it perform to this degree because of all the factors that we talked about. Now, we didn't have the day and date release like we did with Black Widow. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. But given the fact that the Delta surge is still happening, the question was how many people are going to turn out for this film? Are we going to see a number that kind of is a light endorsement of the fact that people still want to go to the theaters? I think that this is, in my opinion, a ringing endorsement of the fact that people are willing to go to the theater when and where they are able to. This number, obviously, I think would have been even bigger if we were at a time where there was no pandemic going on. But I think what we're also seeing is the strength of a word-of-mouth hit. Shang-Chi had an A cinema score. There was a lot of buzz from people that saw it. I was watching social media over the weekend. It was very positive on the movie. I think that drove a lot of people out to the theater on Saturday and Sunday and Monday, which is why we didn't see those drops day to day like we have seen with other films. I think this is just the latest example of what the theatrical model can deliver. And, you know, I'm sure people are going to debate, and I've seen that debate happening about whether or not day and date is still viable. It does make movies more accessible for people, particularly why we are still in this surge of COVID cases here in the United States. And that is a case that I think deserves to be heard. But at the same time, for people that had taken the shovel and just, you know, dug a grave for the theatrical window, I think this is a real repudiation of that, because this shows that for the right movie, and this is something that we talked about a week or two ago when we were looking at the box office results for different movies, and people saying like, oh, this was lackluster, oh, that was lackluster. One of the factors, I think, for some of these movies underperforming was that they just weren't that popular, that they were either polarizing or people just downright didn't like them. Here you see that even under the worst of circumstances, just about, if there's a movie that people are excited about, they will get out and go to the theater. Even knowing probably for a lot of people that they're going to be able to see it at home in 45 days, there are people that want to see movies in the theater, particularly good movies that they hear from their friends are good. One studio already that seems very heartened by what happened with Shang-Chi is Sony, because Sony, if you'll remember, had pushed Venom back to October 15th. They announced that they are now pulling it back up to October 1st, reportedly because of the strength of Shang-Chi's box office numbers. They liked how Venom was tracking, and this proved to them at least that the audience was there, at least in the numbers that they felt would be necessary to put Venom in theaters earlier than they'd expected after pushing it back later. They say a rising tide floats all boats. Let's look at this Labor Day weekend in comparison to Labor Day weekends from the past 20 years. Remember, we've been talking all summer about the fact that we couldn't get the summer box office to perform even to the standards of 2 or 3 years ago. Well, Shang-Chi elevated the Labor Day box office. If you look here, this is the the box office from the year 2000 through this year. Obviously, last year you see that massive drop-off. There were movies just starting to come back into theaters back in Labor Day of 2020. But look at this. 2021's Labor Day box office, when you total up the domestic performance of all movies, outperformed 2019, very similar to 2018 numbers, did better than the 2017 Labor Day box office, better than 2016, 2015, 2014, and then you see that huge box office back in 2013. But we had one of the top Labor Day box office weekends of the past decade, again, in a very difficult time for movie going. Now, if you pay attention to my social media, you may have seen that there was a bit of a dust-up. I wouldn't call it a dust-up, perhaps an exchange of opinions between myself and the Exhibitor Relations Company, which is actually a pretty big name in the box office world. You see Exhibitor Relations quoted a lot when it comes to box office. They put out a tweet on yesterday that said, bottom 5 MCU debuts, The Incredible Hulk, Ant-Man, Captain America, Thor, Shang-Chi, and before you reply, remember, these are numbers, and numbers don't care about pandemics or what month it is. Numbers inform decisions, which I think is a ridiculous statement because numbers absolutely care about pandemics. That's all we've been talking about all summer, is the numbers being affected by the pandemic, and studios are affected by what happens. Studios don't make decisions in a vacuum. They do take into account different factors. That's why we've seen so many movies pushed out of different windows because of the pandemic. So to basically say, as I thought this tweet was implying, that Shang-Chi's performance was one that would be discouraging to Disney or perhaps would push their movies out of theaters was, in my opinion, a pretty ridiculous statement. We had a little bit of a back and forth, and they said, I know it's difficult for some fanboys / fangirls to come to terms with it, but it is what it is until it ain't what it isn't, which I still don't know what that means. And also to really to poo-poo people that are coming at you with, I think, accurate statements as a fanboy, etc., I think is really dismissive and just kind of trying to sidestep having an actual conversation. But context is something that is so important. That's the one point I've made on this show over and over, that you have to put numbers in context, and to say that the numbers are the numbers and it doesn't matter what month it is and it doesn't matter about the pandemic, that's a ludicrous statement. But also, I think that the conclusion, let's even take the whole thing about numbers and not needing context and saying numbers inform decisions. I think that the statement that was made in that original tweet was also completely dismissive of a couple of things. Number one, they were taking a 3-day number when Shang-Chi was opening over a 4-day holiday weekend. And if you've been analyzing the box office for as many decades as Exhibitor Relations has, you should know that the box office behaves differently on a 3-day weekend versus a 4-day weekend. That's why I did this show on Tuesday instead of Monday this week, because I know that the Monday numbers on a holiday weekend are way higher than the average numbers on any other Monday because people space out their movie going a little bit more. So I think to judge it just based on the 3-day number one, that's a flaw in analysis because you're discounting the impact of a holiday weekend on the opening of a film. But also, when you look at, when you're saying, oh, this is a bottom 5 Marvel movie, okay, again, let's take the pandemic out of it. Let's look at the numbers, the raw numbers, nothing else into account. This is the MCU through 3 days domestically. When you look at the grosses, and you'll see here, they were right when you look at the 3-day gross. There are only 4 movies that Shang-Chi was outperforming: The Incredible Hulk, Ant-Man, Captain America the First Avenger, and Thor the Dark World. But when you take into account the holiday weekend and the fact that you're going to have a big surge of movie going on that holiday Monday, let's look at MCU grosses now through 4 days. And you'll see that Shang-Chi immediately jumps up a few spots. It is now outperforming Doctor Strange and Black Widow and Ant-Man and the Wasp, all movies that it was tracking behind when you based it off of the 3-day opening weekend. And if this continues, if this enthusiasm for the film, if we see a great hold next weekend, we could look at a movie that's doing Captain America Winter Soldier numbers. I don't know if it's going to go as high as a movie like Guardians of the Galaxy, we'll see. But it is obvious when you give it just one more day and actually take into account the holiday weekend, that this conclusion that they were pushing, Exhibitor Relations, on Sunday, that this was a bottom 5 MCU debut with the implication that Disney's going to give up on the theatrical model. If you just give it a minute and let all the numbers come in, even context free, they completely kind of start to take apart the conclusion that they were making in that tweet. So, this is not to dunk on anybody, but this is what I talk about with numbers. You can present numbers in a void however you want. And this happens all the time. And for some reason, it seems to happen a lot of time with these groundbreaking Marvel movies. Somebody will take a number and they'll either make excuses for it and say that it's not what it is for some reason, or they'll put it in a bad context. I remember with Captain Marvel, there was numbers about, the drop-off for Captain Marvel between Sunday and Monday was huge. Well, it was the same drop-off that every movie takes between Sunday and Monday, unless it's a holiday weekend like we just had with Shang-Chi, because that's what happens at the box office. Everybody goes to work, and not as many people go to the movies. But people will take that number and say, like, it dropped off 70% from Sunday to Monday. Yeah, that's what every movie does all the time. You just have to be very careful when you're listening to how people spin box office numbers. Check your sources, do a little research, because, a lot of people are out to really share their love for this. And this is not just about money for me. This is about a love for movies. It's about analyzing behavior and why people do things and why they don't do things, what they do and don't go see and why. And there's a lot of other folks that are in this game for the same reason, but there's some other people that are in it to spin. And there's people that have had their spin on this movie for months now, and they don't want to give that spin up easily. A lot of them. So when you hear a box office number or a stat, even for me, take a second, see if you can check it out, back it up. Is that person being forthright about how they're presenting this kind of data? Because here, even with exhibitor relations, you have a company whose been analyzing this data for decades, who I think were... I don't really know what the purpose was in kind of trying to make Shang-Chi look bad, but I think that was a bad conclusion. And I think, and these kinds of bad conclusions often, especially from a trusted source, will set a narrative, an incorrect narrative that other people will run with. Because now you can say, well, Shang-Chi didn't do well because this company that's been doing it for decades says that it didn't do well. When you have a voice, you have a responsibility to use that voice responsibly. And I hope in the future that everybody, including myself, that's talking about these box office numbers is able to do that, because otherwise you can start the misinformation train, and once that misinformation train gets rolling, it's really hard to stop it. So that's my little sermon on numbers and context. Shang-Chi, I think, is unquestionably a successful debut. Week 2, now if it drops 80% in week 2, then we're going to have something else to talk about, but let's look at this weekend right now and judge it as a success. Let's see what happens in week 2 as well. We will track it as it goes. Right now, it has, as we mentioned, it is outpacing Black Widow at the box office because of its big Monday. What's going to happen next weekend? We will see, because there's going to be a lot of people looking at the longevity, including Disney, and I suspect Scarlett Johansson's lawyers, to see how Shang-Chi does in this 45-day exclusive theatrical window. Something else I want to look at a little bit early is the summer weekend tracker, because we have been looking at it all summer long and noting that it did not ever surpass the totals from past summers. That has now changed, because on the last weekend of the summer, the 18th weekend, we have surpassed now the box office totals from both 2018 and 2019. Now, this didn't always line up specifically to Labor Day weekend, but I was looking at the numbers and I think it would have surpassed this regardless. So it took literally all summer for summer 2021 to ever outperform summer 2018 and 2019. And as it turns out, it was Shang-Chi and the fact that Marvel decided to program this movie on Labor Day weekend that took us out of the doldrum that we'd been in. Looking at the top movie per theater, no shock here. It was Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. It brought in $17,532 at 4,300 theaters, and I'm sure that the theater managers appreciate that kind of money rolling in through the door. It's been a while since a movie's brought in money like that, only a few times this summer. Looking at the limited release, so we look at the huge 4,300 plus screen release of Shang-Chi. Let's look at the movies that were in fewer than 1,000 theaters, and a movie that was on the chart last week is now number one. Un Rescate de Huevitos at $173,300 takes the top spot on the limited release chart. Flag Day, which we've seen for the last couple weeks, starring Sean Penn and Dylan Penn, expanded to several more theaters in its third week. It takes in $125,000. The Lost Leonardo, which has been circulating around theaters for a few weeks now, also did a big expansion, at least by specialty box office standards, and it took in $73,794. Together, which was last week's number 3 film in limited release, drops a bit and takes in another $39,000. And Escape from Mogadishu in 11 theaters puts up a decent per theater average. It makes $31,567 in its 5th week. Let's leave the confines of the domestic box office and look at the international box office. This is every market except for the domestic market, the United States and Canada. And no surprise here, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings was also the number 1 movie internationally in the markets in which it opened, $56,200,000. Free Guy pocketed another $25 million internationally. The Tomorrow War, which has been a streaming movie for a few months here domestically, opened in China this past weekend. It made $8.1 million. Paw Patrol, the movie, at number 4 was $7.1 million. And Raging Fire, which we have seen consistently on the international charts, was number 5 with $6.6 million. So when you combine the international box office with the domestic box office, we get the worldwide box office. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings officially marks up about $131.5 million in its opening weekend. Free Guy at number 2 with another $34 million. Mainly driven by its domestic performance, Candyman marks $12.9 million worldwide. Paw Patrol, the movie, at $11.1 million. And then China brings the Tomorrow War in at number 5 at $8.1 million. China, of course, is a market that we are keeping an eye on for several domestic films, including Shang-Chi, Black Widow, several others. The Tomorrow War we saw just opened. Free Guy opened and did pretty well. Still no word on a lot of the other summer releases, and things are going to start backing up pretty soon as more and more movies start coming out. Venom was a big movie in China. So will we see Venom Let There Be Carnage open in China before any of these films? We don't know yet. It just literally day to day is a waiting game. Let's look at the summer box office of 2021, and as we transition out of the summer, I will keep track of this and I will inform you as we have changes. So you may not see this week to week, but as movies move up and down this chart, I'm going to keep track because, I want to look at how my predictions are doing and see what the final top 10 is going to be. Really just a couple changes. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings opens at number 5. By next week, it's going to be number 4, passing Jungle Cruise. Free Guy stays at number 6. Cruella drops down 2 spots to number 7. Space Jam: A New Legacy, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, and The Boss Baby Family Business are now down 1 spot, and that drops The Suicide Squad out of the top 10. So here's what we're looking at, I think, for the summer box office. I think the top 9 are pretty much set. That number 10 spot is really, there's 3 movies that are going to be competing for that. You've got The Boss Baby, obviously. Then you have The Suicide Squad, which is going to be grappling with The Boss Baby. I shocked that that's how this actually turned out. The summer always has a few surprises, but the idea that The Suicide Squad is going to be highly competitive with The Boss Baby Family Business to be on the summer top 10 is crazy. And then the other question mark is Candyman. It's very possible that we could see Candyman on premium video on demand soon, which could hurt its box office prospects, but if it continues to stay strong, it could also compete for that 10th spot. Those are the 3 movies, though, The Boss Baby Family Business, The Suicide Squad, and Candyman, that are going to be, in my opinion, duking it out for that number 10 spot. And if both The Suicide Squad and Candyman miss, that's not great for me because those were 2 of my top 10 films. Although I do think even if Candyman does miss the top 10, I was way closer on my prediction for that film than I was for The Suicide Squad. I predicted that to be my number 2 film of the summer. That may be the biggest miss I've ever had, combined with In the Heights being a top 5 movie. And then Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, as I mentioned right now, it is currently, day to day, through 4 days, outgrossing Black Widow. If it continues on that trajectory, it could very well be the number 1 movie of the summer. We're just going to have to see how it does. It really has 45 days to do its work because then it's reportedly going to be made available on Disney+. But I think it legitimately right now, especially if it holds really well next weekend, has a shot at that number 1 slot. It could be the number 1 movie of the summer, which would mean Marvel has the number 1, number 2 movie of summer 2021. We just don't know yet. As we have been doing, and I will continue also to track this, looking at the highest earning star of summer 2021, Emily Blunt and John Krasinski remain number 1 and number 2, although Free Guy is closing that gap. So if Free Guy does end up outgrossing Jungle Cruise, then John Krasinski will take over that spot by virtue of both of them sharing Quiet Place Part 2 and then Emily Blunt being in Jungle Cruise, John Krasinski having a very tiny part in Free Guy, but it is a credited role, so it counts. Michael Rooker and John Cena remain tied for 3rd place. Dwayne Johnson moves up. He's now the 5th highest grossing star of summer 2021, thanks to that tiny role in Free Guy. The cast of Black Widow at number 6, the cast of F9 at number 7. Lil Rel Howery moves up to number 8. The cast of A Quiet Place Part 2 moves up to number 9, and Taika Waititi stays there at number 10. Shang-Chi, of course, could potentially be moving up this list, although something interesting to keep in mind, we have talked about it a couple times in the specialty box office. There was a movie called 9 Days that was out that made right now around, I think, $500,000. But Benedict Wong is in that movie. So as much money as Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is going to make, Benedict Wong will always be about $500,000 ahead of it. He will officially be above Shang-Chi on this highest earning stars of summer 2021 if it does continue to grow like it has been. So Benedict Wong now angling to be a big name here in summer 2021. He's always a big name, though. He's delightful. I just love seeing him in any Marvel movie, any movie, really. I'm a big Benedict Wong fan. Let's look at the 2021 charts. We'll start domestically. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings jumps in at number 6 on the year at $94 million. That'll be at number 4 by next week. That'll bump Godzilla vs. Kong out of the top 5. Jungle Cruise passes Godzilla vs. Kong temporarily to be the number 4 highest grossing film of the year domestically. Free Guy stays at number 7. Cruella drops down 2 spots to number 8. Space Jam: A New Legacy drops down to number 9. The Conjuring: The Devil Made Me Do It drops to number 10. And that leaves The Boss Baby Family Business out of the 2021 domestic top 10. Looking worldwide, we don't have Shang-Chi on this chart yet. The top 5 remain unchanged, but Free Guy joins the list at number 7. That bumps Cruella down 1 spot, Chinese Doctors down 1 spot, and The Conjuring: The Devil Made Me Do It down 1 spot. That also knocks Jungle Cruise off the list for right now. It just joined that list last week, but I think that it's going to pass The Conjuring, so be on the lookout because I think Jungle Cruise is going to rejoin the 2021 worldwide top 10. Of course, then Shang-Chi could join the list, and then Jungle Cruise would drop out again. There's a lot of angling still to be done for this 2021 worldwide. Looking at the highest grossers worldwide for the previous 365 days, so if you rewind the calendar to 1 year ago, from that day to this day, Free Guy also joining that list. It is now the 9th highest grossing film of the previous 365 days. It knocks out A Little Red Flower. And again, we're starting to see here with the worldwide list, similar to what we saw domestically, the 2021 movies taking over. Although we right now still have Demon Slayer, the movie from 2020, there at number 4. We still have My People, My Homeland at number 6. But they are the final 2 2020 films that are currently on this list. So we'll keep tracking this until or if we have another case where it's all 2021 movies and we're just rehashing what the highest grossing films worldwide for the year are. But it is interesting to see as the box office picks up that those 2020 films are getting pushed out first domestically and now worldwide. That's a sign that things are starting to resume business-wise at the box office. Before we look at the streaming charts, let's take a look back at a previous weekend, and we're going to go back 10 years to September 9th through the 11th. Contagion was the number 1 movie. Boy, if we only knew. On September 9th through 11th of 2011, and here a decade later, it's playing itself out in real time and has been for quite a while. The Help in its 5th week was hanging around at $8.9 million. Warrior, which is a movie, one of the movies from the last 10 years that I know so many people are huge fans of. My Schmodown Teams partner, Ben Bateman, loves this movie, and it is a great movie. Always surprising to see a movie that people loved this much. Did not have a huge box office debut. It debuted at number 3 10 years ago at $5.2 million. If you haven't seen it, it is really good. It took me a while to see it, and when I finally did sit down and watch it, it is great. The Debt in its 2nd week, to be honest, I didn't even remember what this movie was or that it ever came out, at $8.1 million. And Zoe Saldana in Colombiana in its 3rd week was at number 5 with $3.9 million. Before we go, as we always do, let's check out what people are watching at home on the streaming charts, and we will start with Amazon. At number 1 is Don't Breathe. It is available for premium video on demand currently and is number 1 on the Amazon charts. Jungle Cruise is now also available for purchase if you want to purchase it for $30 on the various services. So it is number 2 on Amazon. The rest are all holdovers from last week. Stillwater, Respect, and F9. All available premium video on demand. A Quiet Place Part 2 available for rental. Snake Eyes, G.I. Joe Origins, and The Green Knight available premium video on demand. Black Widow available for purchase at number 9, and The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard available for rent. So much as we have seen in the last few weeks, all of these summer movies now taking up the top 10 on Amazon, available for purchase or premium video on demand or rental, depending on how long they've been in the marketplace. Let's look at what people are buying on iTunes, and The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard remains number 1 as either a purchase or a rental, followed by Jungle Cruise, people buying that, and The Boss Baby Family Business, another movie from Universal, available for purchase. It's at number 3. Wrath of Man is at number 4. Don't Breathe 2, available for premium video on demand rental at number 5. No Man of God, which hit the chart last week, is at 6. Respect and Stillwater are at 7 and 8. A Quiet Place Part 2 re-enters the chart at number 9. And 12 Mighty Orphans, which we've seen throughout the summer off and on the limited release, the specialty box office chart, is at number 12. It is currently available to buy or rent on iTunes. Let's take a look at Netflix. First of all, at the service overall, Clickbait is the number 1 program on Netflix. It is a Netflix original series. It was on there last week. It is at number 1. Money Heist is at number 2. The Netflix series Turning Point, this one focuses specifically on events surrounding 9/11 as we approach the 20th anniversary, is at number 3. Afterlife of the Party, the Netflix original movie, is at number 4. Green Lantern is at 5. Okay. Welcome Home Roscoe Jenkins is at number 6, and because some executive somewhere signed a blood oath with a demon at the crossroads on a lonely, dusty road under the full moon at midnight, Coco Melon remains on the Netflix top 10 and apparently shall remain so until the contract has been paid in blood. Moving on now to the top 10 movies on Netflix. Afterlife of the Party is number 1. Green Lantern is number 2. Welcome Home Roscoe Jenkins is at number 3. Worth is at number 4. The Netflix original He's All That drops to number 5. Wind River's at number 6. If you haven't seen Wind River, that is a great movie. Came out a few years ago. One of my favorite movies from that year. Vivo, the Netflix original, is at number 7. SAS Rise of the Black Swan is at number 8. The original Sweet Girl is at number 9. And at number 10, Bruce Willis in Tears of the Sun. And that does it for charts this week. Next week, we're going to be talking about James Wan's new horror film, Malignant, which is opening here domestically. It's already open in some international markets. Queen Pens is also going to be hitting theaters this week. And a quick programming note, I will be doing my show from the road next week because I will be heading to Los Angeles for a little bit of a combination, a little bit of work, but mostly just some vacation time. Thank you so much for watching me here on my channel. If you want to see even more of what I'm up to, you can check me out on Patreon at patreon.com/Dan Murrell. We are doing our movie club this week, and it's all best original screenplay winners. So I would love for you to come and do that because we're going to be watching some great movies. No matter which ones are chosen, we're still doing some polls to decide which ones we're going to watch. We also do watch-alongs and Schmodown study sessions. So many fun things. I'd love to have you come and join me there. But also, thank you for joining me here on the channel. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. All of the YouTube things that are things that I always forget to ask people to do. But we are getting closer to 100,000 subscribers here on the channel, and I'd love to keep that growth going. I appreciate you listening to my take on the Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings box office numbers, and I hope you'll come back as we continue to track its progress at the box office in the weeks to come. Thank you so much. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.